name is Marcy Conrad Nutt. My firm is Yarrow Architecture, and the chapter is Passive House, Minnesota, based out of Minneapolis in Minnesota. Yeah, I am not honestly sure when I first heard about Passive House. I think it was just a process of reading and maybe even websites. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that I was picking up books probably like 8 or 9 years ago, which at that time was kind of hard to find information on Passive House, actually. At my local bus stop, I met just a local expert in Passive House, Tim Ann of T Studio. Our kids happen to go to the same school. And so we just started talking as you do at a bus stop and found out that we were both architects. And also, I found out about the Passive House connection. So from there, Tim got me roped into Passive House, Minnesota pretty easily. And I've been involved for about, I think, 7+ years now. I've been interested in architecture for a long time. At first, I wanted to be an artist when I was really little. So it started from an art background, and when I was little, just drawing and doing all sorts of things like that. And then we would tour historic homes. If there was a house that was being built in my neighborhood, I'd ride my bike over, walk over, and just walk through a construction site, or old farm buildings that were falling down, that kind of thing. I had a little clay house that I ended up making floor plans for and imagining what the space would be like inside. So it's just been something I've always been interested in as a kid. I actually didn't know any architects until I went to university. So I joke that I wanted to be an architect probably since I was 8, but luckily I liked it once I found out what it was. I guess some of my favorites, Oliver Aalto. I like how he took the international style of the time and made it Finnish. The cultural regionalism is something that's always appealed to me, and being really thoughtful about just applying the vernacular of regional architecture, and just the focus on textures and the human experience in his architecture is something that I love. Carlos Scarpa, just the sculptural aspect and making the everyday things that you need for a building, like a gutter, or taking care of stormwater, and making something like that beautiful and sculptural. I also like, from the Passive House side, Opal Architecture does some really great work, and Archetype. And then there's some artists that I love too, like Richard Serra. Have a love of Corten and the spaces that are created with those simple bent forms. And there's a local artist, Tia Kiobonpin, who does some beautiful work with thread on paper, and just had an exhibit at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So all those kind of very textural, beautiful, modern and vernacular types of work are really appealing. I just founded Yarrow Architecture in September of this year. When I was looking for a name for the architecture firm, I was searching for different prairie plant names, and just thinking about the kind of qualities that I really valued in architecture and wanted this firm to create. And yarrow is a native prairie plant that's super resilient to pretty extreme climate conditions. It's very versatile. It's something that's been around forever, that our ancestors have used in many different ways. And it's also beautiful. And those are qualities that I wanted to express in the name. I think the real differences that the Yarrow architecture is going to provide, what really sets it apart, is really looking at the vernacular and the local climate. On top of that, it's applying the higher tech, like latest building science of Passive House, and doing energy modeling from the beginning, which is not standard practice at all in architecture firms. And that is part of every project at Yarrow, is that we will be doing Passive House modeling. I've always been doing some kind of community advocacy. So, for a long time, I did affordable housing advocacy. But with advocacy for Passive House, it's really just getting out there and telling people how important it is to build better. We're going to have really extreme weather. Our buildings are going to need to be able to handle those extreme conditions, whether it's wildfire or drought, higher temperatures and humidity. Even in places like Minnesota, Passive House is an excellent solution to that. So it's just a lot of education, and that's the nice thing about Passive House Minnesota is that we get a chance to go out there and just give people just a Passive House 101 and explain and introduce people to what it is, and just communicate how important it is to build better than code and better than how we're building now. At the Icebox Challenge, that was really interesting because for those who might not know, it's two different boxes. And one is built to code and the other one is built to an example of Passive House. The stark difference of the performance of the two really stood out for people who saw the results. By the time the ice all melted out of the code built box, the Passive House one still had like 70% of its ice remaining. Really communicating to people what code gets you and what our existing built environment is really like. I think there's a misconception by a lot of people in the public that they're getting better buildings than they are, and that architects and builders in general, when there's talk about sustainability, are delivering more than I think is really getting built from an energy efficient standpoint, and that we can do better. And so when I think people know that there's going to be a difference between the code built and the Passive House built, but when they see how much of a difference, that's the part that really stands out to people, that it's so drastically different. You can't make any of this happen without good collaboration with your clients. And so I think it's just at first, it's a lot of listening, of really understanding what the client needs, what their concerns are, what their desires are, and taking that along with the climate considerations and energy modeling, create a good building from that. At the end of the project, you should have a building that you're excited about, that is meeting all of those qualities and goals that you set from the very beginning. And there's so many good tools I'm really excited to dive into, with retrofitting, with phasing, pre-certifying a phasing plan. Really interested in sitting down with people, listening to where they're at, and creating roadmaps. So let's say you can only do 2/3 of what you're planning on doing to get to a Passive House level retrofit. But is it possible to do that 1/3 later on, and what does that look like? And that's something that's actually something the Passive House Institute has worked on a lot, and they've done pilot projects. One of the reasons I formed my firm is because I wanted to play a part in making Passive House mainstream. That's really the fundamental reason. And so that's what I would like to see in 10, 15 years, would be to see Passive House be something that people understand more, that there's more recognition of what that is, and that there's more people asking for it, building these type of buildings. There's more expertise, that it's just more of a mainstream way to build.